What is up, MFers? We're at the backyard pool today and we are going to be talking about this bait right here, the 6 cents Panorama. Honestly, I don't know if there's another bait on the market that is more misunderstood slash best selling slash hated on slash giant bass catching as this bait right here. And honestly, I can understand why. It's very confusing how to rig this bait and fish it. It comes from sizes all the way to this 9-inch size down to this itty bitty 2-inch size and everything in between. But trust me, I have some ways I'm gonna show you that you can rig this thing up, 5, 6, 7 different ways that I've caught giant bass on. I'm gonna show you under the water and maybe even above the water. Stay tuned to the end because I'm gonna show you a sneaky little rigging method that I've never seen anybody fish like this before, and honestly, it might be my favorite way to fish it. Now, before I rig these up and I show you the underwater rigging systems that I like, let's take a look at the different sizes once again in comparison. We'll start at the very smallest one, and you notice that there's different finishes on these baits as well. Some are painted, some are just poured, some have photo finishes on them like these two on the end. This little itty bitty guy is 2 inches long. I guess there's my finger for reference. Very, very, very small bait. Great for crappie, bass, but I've caught giant smallmouth and even catfish on some of these baits. They just catch everything. But 2 inches, 2.8 inches right here. This color is called Goby, cool little printed color. This one right here is the 3.5 inch, so we jump pretty much up perfectly in scale from size to side. That's 3.5. This guy is 5 inches long, this bluegill pattern. The see-through shad pattern right here is 6.5, and then we have the giant one that is the 9.5 inch version. And honestly, they're all pretty much to scale. The only thing that's really a difference as far as the body style goes, as they get bigger, of course, they go up in scale with their width as well, not just their length. So, of course, the 9-inch is going to be the thickest, not only in the middle portion, but also down here at the tail as well, and that is going to play a lot into how my favorite way to rig this guy right here will be. I'll show you that in just a second. I'm gonna get these rigged up right now, show you what my favorite ways to rig the small size versions are, but I want you to go in the comments right now, just let me know what other underwater baits you guys want to see me talk about, what other techniques you want to see me talk about, or just test out in the underwater pool style videos. That would be super helpful. So these two smaller sizes, the 2-inch version and the 2.8 inch version, of course you can rig them several different ways. I've caught them on a jig head, kind of fishing it like a jig head minnow. That can be really effective when you're fishing for bass that are on really, really small bait fish, but 6 cents now has the fiction minnow, which sits horizontal with its tail, and it kind of works better for me in that scenario. So to me, these two small sizes right here are exclusively used with this technique right here, and that is, of course, the old drop shot rig. I fish these on my just traditional drop shot rig, but I fish them almost exclusively on an open hook like that, similar to how you'd fish the 6 cents glitch or a flatworm or something like that. I'm basically going to be nose hooking these small little itty bitty baits, and that's a small hook, guys. That's a size 3 drop shot hook, and it's almost too big for this guy. But I'm not going to be rigging it so the fish is sitting in the water column up and down, because I want it to have as much motion as possible. And you're gonna see that with all the different rigging methods I use. Like this, if that bait was just sitting there, fine, I'm sure you could catch fish on it dead sticking. But if you take this and you rig it the flat way, so that hook, which is going to be sitting perfectly vertical underwater, has the bait sitting flat, that's going to give it all that wave and that jiggle and that tail motion. Truthfully, all these baits, but these smaller ones especially, are baits I use when it's tough to get bit on anything else. So maybe you go through an area, you throw that glitch, you're catching fish on it, you know there's still fish in the area, you throw that the party minnow out there, which is another one of my favorite nose hook drop shot baits, and you stop getting bit, or they slow down, or they're biting it funny. That's when I will throw this bait out there. And I know we just talked about giving it that wavy motion. Letting it sit there motionless has been one of the most effective ways for me and many other anglers to fish this smaller size 2 and 2.8 inch, and really all the baits as well. So don't be afraid to go the less is more method when you're fishing it on a drop shot rig just like this. Now, as we increase the size of the Panoramas to this size right here, which is the 3.5 inch, up to the 5-inch size, our techniques start to become a lot more versatile in what we can do and how we can rig this bait, especially because as we get to the 5-inch size, you're gonna start to see a lot more thickness in the bait, up from the 3-inch size or 3.5-inch size, and then especially up from those two smaller sizes. But here's two of my favorite ways to rig this thing. I'll show you the first one right here, and it's funny, I get more comments about this rigging method than probably any others as far as a success rate for people catching fish on it, and that is as a chatterbait trailer. Now, you can either throw this thing just plain by itself, you can rip the skirt off and throw it as a chatterbait trailer, just like that. That's probably my favorite way to throw it. Or you can just make it a trailer on the back of just a traditional skirted chatterbait, of course. Leave the skirt on there and fish it like that. But what's really, really deadly effective about this thing, I think, is when you're fishing it in cleaner water. This is not a dirty, muddy water technique for me. If I'm fishing in muddy water, I'm gonna be throwing something that has a lot of contrast with the color of the water, whether that be a straight green pumpkin, something that's bright fire orange, black and blue, of course, or a white shad style bait. But when the water's a little bit cleaner, yet you're fishing around a lot of grass, or maybe you're fishing in cooler water and you need something that has that really tight shimmy and vibration of a chatterbait, that is when a Panorama is absolutely deadly. Zark hit me up literally yesterday and said, my buddy just caught 2 7s and a 6 on a Panorama. And I was like, dude, that's awesome. What was he doing with it? You know, thinking Texas rig or dragging it around or on a swim bait or something like that. He said he was throwing it as a chatterbait trailer. And I was like, duh, of course. That's how I've caught a ton of fish on it as well. And it's one method that I hear so many people reaching out, talking to me, telling me they've caught big fish on it. It has not an overly, you know, over the top crazy tail kick action. Really, the action matches the naturalism of this bait right here. And so again, I will throw the natural shad colors, bluegill colors when I'm throwing it as a trailer, but it has a really subtle tail kick that really translates well from the blade of this jig. And it's one of the only ways, maybe it is the only way actually, now that I think about it, that I fish this bait upright on its presentation. And it's important for this technique to get that guy perfectly straight rigged on there. Otherwise your chatterbait's gonna have the propensity to wanna roll over or just not track and run true. That's something that's really off-putting, I think, to bass. If something's just cocked off center and run through the water column just a little bit off kilter, you want it to be as straight as possible. Now, something that I've noticed is a little bit sneaky you can do. You can take a scissors and you can actually trim this bait, and so it's more of a streamlined profile. It'll make the bottom a little bit flatter. There won't be as much meat down there, back behind there, and that will also allow this bait to run a little bit straighter and more true. Another tip I'd give you guys, especially if you're ripping the skirt off, is to take a little dab of super glue and pinch that right against the head of that bait, because it's not much meat to grab right there. And of course, you're not gonna wanna be adjusting that constantly as your bait's sliding down over and over. This one I have rigged up right here is the 5-inch size, and on this hook right here is a little bit longer shank on this bladed jig you guys might be seeing pretty soon. So you can get away with that little bit bigger profile, but also, especially on more of a traditional shank length of a chatterbait, or if you wanna go really finesse, maybe with like a mini max or just a homemade really small one, this 3.5-inch size is a very, very good option as well. Fishing super, super natural, tight, and it's something I need to deploy more in my fishing as well, because I keep hearing guys catching these, and it might be the most effective way I've heard of people fishing this for above average style fish, and if you're Zark's buddy, giant fish as well. Another rigging method that I have kind of been keeping on the DL, and I really love how it looks, and I wasn't sure if it would work, but is using the 5-inch and the 3.5, but I really like the 5-inch as a trailer on a buzz bait. And I mean, it looks like it would just come over the top of the water and that thing would have no action. I mean, obviously it looks really natural into the water, but I was shocked when I put it in the water, and as this blade churns and just has the natural vibration of a buzz bait, the tail has a super nice little sideways quiver and wiggle to it. And of course, I don't know how much that matters. I think more than not, guys are throwing, you know, I've always thrown them to a flappy style trailer on the back of a buzzbait. I think that might be more to create drag and fish it slower than it is to actually appeal to a fish that's looking up at it. And so I don't know if it's a bad thing that you don't get the tail kick out of this guy right here, but it does have, just from the motion, especially this one, again, you might be seeing it sooner than later. The motion of this bait and the vibration, the natural vibration of a buzz bait is going to have this little tail just constantly quivering and kicking. And what looks more natural on the back of a buzz bait than that right there? Another thing, I'm sure many of you guys that love to do this already are seeing it in this bait. This flat side here is as good of a skipping platform as you possibly can find in a buzzbait trailer. Of course, you could also cut it right there, make this buzzbait, make this trailer sit nice and flush with whatever head they're using, or you can fish it on one of the versions of buzzbait where they're made to have a toad or whatever trailer slide up over the lead piece. That would be great as well, but again, add a little dab of super glue depending on your trailer, and this thing will skip and hold up really, really well. This plastic, by the way, is a lot tougher than a lot of people think it probably is, and it just, I mean, it has great action, and it's going to give you a different profile, just give you a little bit of an edge that other guys are not doing as a buzzbait trailer. Try it out. We're gonna bump up in size a little bit for this next rigging system, but this is probably the rig that has slain more double-digit bass on the Panorama than any other rig out there, and that is the Divine swim bait jig head mixed with either the 5 or the 6.5 inch size. I really like the 6.5 inch size when I'm fishing around these giant Texas bass. So we're gonna rig one of these guys up to get things started. But this is a cool rig because, as you can see with the axle, it allows that to pivot like so. And so you're going to go right into the nose of this 6.5 inch guy right here. Of course, use the twist lock to thread it on there, and you're not gonna go through a bunch of these guys. And I thread it all the way up until it's flush with this head right here, and then you're gonna match up where the hook goes through. This is a 1/2 ounce version of the head. I like a 1/2 up to a 3/4. Sometimes if it's less than 6-7 feet of water, I will go down to like a 3/8 ounce size, but you'll spear it through. And I actually like to loosen it up in there a little bit because you'll kind of see, and I don't know if you're gonna really be able to picture what's going on with this bait in my pool because it's only a few feet deep and I have to hold the camera kind of right by it right there. You're not gonna get the full range of motion you can get. This is what I'm throwing whenever I'm gonna be scoping individual fish. Basically, I'm gonna flop it in there, throw it on one's head or past him, and kind of swim it up to him. And when I'm talking about swim it up to him, I'm gonna give it these just short twitches of the rod when it's in the water column and let it kind of flow and get the fish's attention with it. And it's not gonna be a bait where you generally get a fish to come up, he sees it and then he goes up and eats it, because of course it's swimming on its side, it's a little bit unnatural. So I like to let it kind of flow down, and it's got a little bit of a spiral on the fall to it because it's got this flat side down as opposed to this keeled head design. And so it's gonna spiral down a little bit, and as it's going down, I like to hop it around, give it some steady twitches, some shorter, faster twitches as it goes by the fish. And one of my favorite things to do is, as soon as this bait hits the bottom, I don't touch it. I let it sit there, I dead stick it, and see if that is what gets that fish to bite. Again, I told you this earlier when I was talking about the drop shot with this bait. Less can be more. Less is almost always more with this bait right here. And so let that sumbitch sit right there, not move. And if one doesn't eat it, I do catch them, just shaking it, stirring it up right there. It's great for throwing on fish with that live scope, forward-facing type presentation. One other way though, strongly recommend you rig this bait and fish this rig right here, would be bed fishing. I know a lot of guys fish this on like a Tokyo rig, but to me, it works just as good like this. And the nice thing is you can fish it weedless. You can really expose that hook if you need to, because as many of you guys know, bass beds are around sticks, they're around grass, they're around lily pads, and as soon as you pull it through the bed or get it up to the bed, it's going to be all bogged up. And this is a way you can fish it without doing that. And again, get it on that bed and you can shake this thing and it makes it look like there's a bluegill or a shad or whatever the hell they think it is down there stirring up their bed, and they can't freaking stand it. That is a great way to fish this bait. All right, let's get to Big Mama here. I'm going to show you this rigging system, then I'm going to show you my sneaky one here when I get done with it. This is the 9-inch Panorama. That's a big old wad of freaking plastic that can get balled up and go over the point of the hook, but also freaking attract a fish in a way that they've never seen a bait that's like this before, that doesn't have a kicking tail on it, or it's not a flutter spoon. And that's pretty much how I like to fish this bait, is a ton like a flutter spoon, those exact style situations. It's like a natural flutter spoon to me in my head. The way I do that is I take a giant 12-aught beast hook, I take it with the screw lock, and we're gonna fish it similar to the last rig, except you don't have a jig head, you have the weight down here, but you're gonna make it perpendicular, just like so, so that the weight is on the bottom part of this bait. Think Magnum flutter spoon with this bait, both in the types of areas that you throw it and the way that you work it. Once again, if I'm pulling up to an offshore group of fish, especially in the summer, I've caught 2-pounders on this, no problem. I've caught a 10-pounder on this just as well. But offshore, schools that need to see something a little bit different, fishing it in brush piles, fishing it over the top of brush piles is an absolutely deadly way to get the fish to react to this. But one really cool thing about this, and I fish it on like my big 7.7 with heavy rod with 20-pound fluorocarbon or 25-pound even, but I'll throw it out over the top and this thing's gonna spiral like crazy on the fall. So you might want to use a little swivel with it, right up above it. You want good ones for this, trust me. You don't want the terminal tackle to not match up with the meat of this hook, the meat of your rod, and the meat of the bass that's going to be eating something this size. And basically I let it spiral down the fall, and then I'm gonna give it a long rip. Similar to a flutter spoon, except what's different about this bait, obviously it's a plastic bait, it's more natural than a flutter spoon, is the bulbous thickness of this tail causes it to kick and shimmy and dart to the side. But when you rip it, it's got that enough of a flange there towards the tail that it's going to cause it to kick. It's the only one of these that really has that. The 6.5 inch does a little bit, but this one really has that pronounced kick when you rip it up off the bottom. Deadly, deadly way that I've caught fish that I've worked through with a flutter spoon, I've worked through with a hair jig, crankbait, dragon, and then I pull this thing out and I can usually get one more to bite, and it's usually a damn good one. No reason why you can't throw it into a brush pile or a big school of fish on the first cast though either, and see if they'll freaking get it, because usually a better quality one's gonna be eating this bait. That's about the only way that I like to personally rig this bait. You could use any of the other rigging methods, drop shot, freaking chatterbait trailer, throwing it on that swinging head, whatever you want, but this one on that big beast 12-aught beast hook is my favorite way to rig this up, because that weight's down below, spirals it, and then it gives it that nice tail kick when you rip that rod. Okay, last but not least, let's talk about the old sneak way to rig up the Panorama. We're gonna take the 5-inch size, and you can do it with the 6.5, you could do it with the 3.5, but the 5-inch is kind of the sweet spot for this rigging method. And we're gonna take a good old-fashioned swing head. You guys know about the swing head. You've seen this since about the damn start of my channel, definitely since the start of my channel. But we're not gonna rig it traditionally like you guys would think, where you go through the nose like you do on a swing head. A creature bait generally is the best to throw on this rig, as many people know. And you rig it straight like so. Would that catch fish? Absolutely it would catch fish. It has caught fish for me. And again, the dead sticking, not moving method can be the deal. But the way that is sneaky that I rigged this, that I learned from another Elite Series angler, I don't think I should probably say who it is, just out of respect of his knowing and figuring this out. The way you're gonna rig this thing is to go back about 1/2 inch, back to about the gill plate or so, the middle of the gill plate on this Panorama. It's gonna look a little silly, and then that portion that you went 1/2 inch back on is going to be sitting on the bottom of that swing head like so. Now you're not going to want to leave too much of a bend in this bait, because otherwise you're not going to get a hook in it, and that's also why I like to rig it on this hook, which is a Owner EWG Plus, J-Hook Plus, I believe, X wide gap J-Hook, I believe is what it's called. Works perfect for this, and so it's going to look just like that. And what this is going to do, as opposed to a straight flatter rigged bait that's going to come across the bottom and have that nice side-to-side movement, this thing is going to catch on the bottom of the lake with the nose of this plastic as it's kind of grinding along when you're dragging this swing head, which is how I like to fish it. And as you reel it, you are going to twitch the slack in your line. It's going to be a little bit tight, but twitch the slack in your line the entire way back in, and that is going to cause drag with this head. That's going to cause a vibrating of the tail up here. And this is a deadly, deadly way that's very, very sneaky. I've never seen anybody fish it like this, and honestly, until I talked to this Elite Series angler, I never knew that this was a technique that would work. But the guy's a hammer, so you can comment down below if you think you know who it is. But the dragging of the head and the way that this bait, it pops this bait in this swinging hook up in the water column and gives it this wild side-to-side action as you're pulling it along the bottom, is absolutely the deal. Now, one thing you can do, of course, to keep this bait from sliding down the shank like it's gonna wanna try to sometimes, is you can fish it on a hook that's got a little bit of a keeper, or you can take a little peg stopper and slide it up the hook right to that bend in the hook as well. That's one thing you can do, because over time it will want to just kind of ride down. I don't know what it's going to look like in the bottom of this pool. You guys are looking at it right now probably. That thing is a deadly way that other guys have not thrown it, especially offshore groups of fish that are very, very smart. I strongly encourage you to go out there and give it a try. Well, that's all I got, guys. I've caught fish on the Panorama swim bait and a bunch of different other techniques, but those are my absolute favorites. Again, comment below, let me know what other underwater pool videos, what techniques, what baits you want to see underwater, and see how they act and see how I like to rig them to catch more fish. And don't forget to also subscribe. If you're not a subscriber, become one. And I give baits away all the time to subscribers, so whether you're fishing this 2-inch or this 9-inch, I hope I taught you guys something today, and I will catch you guys soon. Peace.
I'm not sorry, I can't help this.